Good day to all of you. Today we will study the basic principles of object-oriented programming. So the main contents we are going to study are, we will look at the old type, that is the procedure-oriented programming concept, and we will shift to a paradigm shift to object-oriented programming. In short, we call OOPs, OOP, OOPs, and we'll learn the fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming. Let's have a look at procedure-oriented programming. The olden days programming languages like COBOL, Fortran, C, etc., they're all known as procedure-oriented programming approach. It's mainly because they were written as sequence of things to be done. Okay, inputting, processing, and printing. Some functions or some procedures are written to read the data, calculate the work we needed, and print the or output the data. A number of functions were written to accomplish these tasks. And then the whole program looked like a bunch of some small procedures or functions. We normally define the program as a set of instructions accomplish a work. So usually that set of instructions should follow a top-down approach, and we write a flow chart to organize a program or to know the flow of control of the program. So when we concentrate on the development of functions, a little attention is given to the data. In a multi-function program or in a function where there are many programs, data is usually set as a global variable because it is needed to be accessed by all the functions. If a data is declared inside a single function, it is called as local data, and that is accessed only inside that function. But we need the data to be accessed by all the functions, to be known to all the functions. So usually the data is declared as global data. Now these global data are vulnerable to unintentional changes. It means which function is changing what data, we are not very sure with. In large programs, it is very difficult to identify the data. Where is the data? Which function is manipulating the data? And when a function is over, what is the condition of the data? So in such cases, we need to revise an external data structure such that all functions access the data. So this opportunity or this method makes lots of errors to creep in. So what we do is we have to get rid of errors when we write programs. The program should be 100% perfect. So there are some other drawbacks for procedure-oriented programming. It's like they do not have a easy approach for real-world problems. Okay, and the real-world problems, like when there is lots of data to be input and the data processing is very little and printing is also too much. When there is an emphasis for data more than the process. Okay, in such, most of the real world problems are of that kind, and in such cases the procedure oriented programming fails a lot. So we need some approach where we need to bother a lot about the data. Action oriented or function oriented programming approach, they do not solve they are not capable of solving many real world problems. So the basic characteristics of procedure oriented programming is they emphasis on doing things or algorithms or functions. Big programs are divided into smaller groups, and those smaller procedures are called as functions. And one set of global data is shared by many functions. Okay? And functions transform data from one form to another, and it is a top-down approach. Now let us have a look at the OOP method or OOP paradigm. Let us completely change our function-oriented idea to data-oriented idea. So this is object-oriented programming, as we have already studied. It is in short known as OOP. Okay, OOPs treat data as a critical element, not the function. Data has to be protected first, and the entire program development is dependent on protecting the data. And the master of the program is the data, not the function. It's a bottom-top approach. Okay, object-oriented programming approach is a bottom-top approach. The whole process is, whole paradigm is to tie the data closely to the functions that operate on it, and it protects the accidental changes by other functions or by outside functions. The data is decomposed into smaller objects called smaller things called objects, and functions are built to handle those objects. If an object is declared under one class is another concept of object-oriented programming. That object can be handled only by the functions which are associated with that class. Some important features of object-oriented programming is emphasis is more on data rather than the functions or procedures. Programs are divided, or the data is divided into objects and classes. Data structures define the characteristics of the object. For example, suppose fruit is a class. The two types of fruits are there. One is the fruits which we can peel and the fruits which we eat without peeling. For example, banana is a fruit which we can peel. We have to peel and eat, whereas apple is a fruit which we do not peel. We directly eat it. So under fruit class, there are subclasses which have to be peeled and which need not be peeled. Okay, suppose we take apple as a object. The characteristics are of the fruit. We can think some 3-4 characteristics of the fruit as it's need not be peeled, it's sweet, it's directly eaten, not cooked or not baked. I think it can be directly eaten, and its size, color, all these are the characteristics of a fruit, and that is generalized and the class is created. The one class or so-called it's a kind of data structure, and it is designed such that it includes almost all characteristics of an object or necessary characteristics of an object. Functions operate on the data and tied together to the data structure, or in most of the classes this data structure, most of the OOPs, it is called as class. Data is hidden. The major feature here in OOPs is data is hidden. It has to be accessed only by the public functions written to access it. Any other program or any other external function cannot access the data. So some major features of object-oriented programming are the data or the objects communicate with each other through functions. New data and functions can be easily added whenever necessary. Bottom-up approach is used in this program design. So some basic or fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming are classes, inheritance, polymorphism, dynamic binding, and message passing. Let us learn all these in detail in the next session. Thank you.